All right, everybody, we've got another very special guest for you all. Everybody, please welcome to the show, Adam Cahoon. Welcome, Adam.
Hi. Thanks,
Hey.
guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna do a Scottish accent, Chris. I'm a little upset that
Cahoon.
Cahoon.
There we
Welcome
go.
to the show. There we go.
Yeah, my whole family will turn around if you say that.
Yeah, okay. That's
Hey,
awesome.
they're talking to us.
Yeah, that's us. That's for sure. They're all wearing kilts. Yeah,
It's kind of
so-
like me. Like my family's, my grandfather changed his last name when he came to America. So like,
yeah.
if you meet another runt, they're related to me somehow.
Oh,
every
really?
one of them.
Yeah,
Yeah, because it's a made
there's
up.
literally
he made up the
there's
name.
no one else in the world.
Yeah, that's a made up name. Yeah. So Adam, thanks for being here. It's your first time. We have to do the annoying thing of putting you through the gauntlet of telling us your origin story of comics. You've had some success as of lately. We're going to talk about that. So, what got you into the industry? Doing art and comics and stuff like that. So, how did that come about for you?
So I initially got into comics like in elementary school. I was in my elementary school. I was like one of 3 kids that drew. Like I knew who the other 2 kids were, and we were all kind of at the same level. And then like in the 6th grade, I had a kid in my class who drew kind of like just like an adult. Like if I drew muscles on a hero, it was like a sweater full of blankets, you know.
Yeah, right.
But he had like musculature and everything. Everything looked like it was in the right place. And
wow.
And I went up to him. I mean, I befriended him immediately because he had this gift that I didn't have, and I needed it. And I was like, "How are you doing this?" And he was like, "Oh, it's all comics." And he turned me on to the X-Men and to Art Adams specifically. And so I got into comics more as like a tool to get better at drawing initially.
Right.
And then like around high school, I started to paint, and I kind of fell in love with that, and I just wanted to be a painter. And so I kind of threw comics to the side because I felt like that wasn't like fine art, like I was suddenly kind of enamored with. And so I would pick up comics here and there, but there was kind of this long kind of like winter in the wilderness where like I wasn't looking at comics at all. And I went to school to be a painter. I got out and I was lucky enough to find a gallery to represent me, and I had a ton of group shows and a handful of solo shows, and for a while I was just a painter. And I did that, and then I kind of realized that community, that there's no kind of community there. There's no like real like support and camaraderie, and you're working by yourself in a cave for months on end, and then you show your work, and you're only talking to like gallery dealers and gallery owners and collectors, and it's kind of a like snobbish kind of high society world.
Right.
And so I kind of realized I was falling out of love with that and didn't know what I was going to do. And my buddy Mark Espinoza, he wrote a script for Greetings from the Maglev, and he rang me up and he was like, have you ever considered doing a comic? Because I have a script and I need someone to draw it. And I was like, I'd never considered that. But I kind of needed something to do as I was kind of moving away from painting. And so I was like, yeah, I'll just do it because I love Mark to death. Like we were friends prior to this project. And so I was just happy to work with him on anything. And I was like, I'll just do this until I figure out what I'm going to do next. And I think I spent about a year on the first book. And then at the end of that, it was all off to the races. And I was like back in shops, and I was back reading books, and I'm back going to cons. And I realized I was no longer like a contract hire for this project. And suddenly I was in a place where I was going to do this myself, because that community is there. Like that, you go into those cons, and that room is supportive. And I mean, at least, you might have to look for it, but it's out there. And like, there's people who want to work as a team on a project. And that was really attractive to me. It was really kind of the polar opposite of what I was finding in painting. Because you could do it all yourself, but the likelihood is you're going to have a writer that you're going to work with, and you're going to have a colorist you're going to work with, and a letterer, and you're going to kind of collaborate. And all of that is just going to elevate everybody's creative output. And so suddenly that was very, like, I like the idea of having a team to work with, to be working with other creatives. And I like the community. I like getting excited for cons and going to cons and tabling and meeting people. And there's so much more. Like the first con I ever went to was just a small one in San Jose, California, called Silicon Valley Comic Con. And I met Art Adams there. I didn't even know he was going to be there. Like, I didn't look at the docket. I was like, oh, it's a small con. No one goes to these things compared to like Comic Con in San Diego. And so I went, and he's just at a table, and I just walked up and talked to Art Adams. And I was like, I'm talking to to a god. Like,
yeah.
I've been following you since the 6th grade, and you're just
Yeah.
right here.
Right.
And it was the world is just different in comics than like fine art. It's so much more approachable, and you can do, the scale is much greater. You go to like a zine fest and you got people like stapling their pages together themselves, or you go to like San Diego Comic-Con, you've got Marvel's there premiering movies, and you kind of have this whole, you can meet all those people, and the kind of the spectrum is there, and like it just that took over. Now I make comics.
I think I mean, we talk about it all the time because we have like a podcast community and a lot of indie writers and artists in there and stuff. And I think part of the success is you need those people. Everybody needs to support each other, kind of.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that. That's just, that's so much for me personally. And I know that doesn't necessarily work for everyone, but for me personally, that's how I want to make art. Like, that's how I want to be creative is sort of, like the most fun I had, as a painter was when I was in school, when I was in a painting, when I was in art school, because you go into the studio and you've got all these other artists, and you're all learning, and you're all making mistakes, and you're all like lending people like mediums and paints and different brushes and different techniques. And like, there's so much more like, oh, we're all kind of in this together. And then you get out and you're like, oh, I'm in my studio by myself. And I like kind of the social aspect of comic book projects, because it's just more like you're hanging out with your friends and making art at the same time.
I've seen it on the other side too, where a lot of artists like comics because they can be by themselves doing the art, right? You see them succeed that way too. So
yeah, I
have seen it both ways, but if you don't know the right channels and things like that, it's really tough. So
yeah, and it is nice. You bring up a good point. It is nice to have a balance of both, because there are obviously, like, the drawing is done by myself, in quiet a space as possible. But every day, whether it's necessary or not, I'm sending like I'm sending my writers panels I did. I'm like, hey, look at this thing I just drew.
Yeah.
Like, a couple times a week, I'm just reaching out for no reason, just being like, hey, I did this thing. What do you think? And they're like, oh, that looks great. And then you're in a dialogue, and it's always awesome. Constantly like refreshing. Yeah.
Having more of a direct like communication with your fan base too is really nice too, because you literally go to the shows and you're like, the person walks up to you is like, man, I love that book, it was great, blah blah, and you can have that conversation. Where a lot of other mediums, like an actor, when do they get to see the fan base?
Yeah.
Or they come up and call you a piece of shit. But either way it's to your face, right?
I'll take that.
Sometimes you need some negative reinforcement, Mike,
Yeah, hey.
Bad press is still press.
Do better next time.
Sorry, sir.
Awesome. So then, this you had the Kickstarter for Greetings from the Maglev, and was that different getting a script and doing the art that way? I mean, because like, when you're painting, you're usually starting with your own ideas, right? Or your own, what you want to do.
Yeah, so you have, obviously much more autonomy when you're painting. I do kind of like, and I've been very fortunate with the projects I've been on. The writers have all been very collaborative, and it's all been very like, here's our script, but try and make it your own as best you can, and do, be as creative as you can. Just kind of hit these marks. I like those marks. Like, I like that little bit of structure around what I'm doing, where it's a little bit more like I'm solving a riddle, because I have to kind of, through my vision, sort of tell their story and hit their beats, and obviously hit the page turns and the corners, and I like that, a little more of a constraint on what I'm doing. I kind of like that as a project. Whereas, like, sometimes, when I was painting, there'd be entire days where I wouldn't work because I'd be like, I don't have the idea. Like, it's not with me. But with comics, it's almost like I'm not relying on the muse or like some inspiration or some like unseen thing. It's like, here's the script. These are the things I got to plug in, go to work. And I haven't missed a day. Like, there's not a day where I'm just like, oh, I just don't feel like drawing. There's always like, just draw this panel. That panel's easy. You can get that one done. Like,
right.
So that's never, for me, that's never really been a problem. Like, reading, taking someone else's script and making a page out of it.
Do you find yourself enjoying more like very detailed scripts where the writer gives you every little detail of what needs to be in there, or maybe a little more vague where it's just like, and here's a monster, figure it
out. Turn page, monster.
Yeah.
Draw.
No, I want a little bit of vague. I want a little bit of ambiguity.
Yeah.
I don't want like is it Alan Moore? I think is very like insanely detailed with what he expects people to draw. Now he hasn't called me. He's not asking me to draw anything.
Okay.
But I do like in the handful of writers I've worked with, there's like there are specifics, but then there's freedom within that too. But I want a little more than it's a monster. But if you give me it's a monster, then I'm just gonna have that's just free play.
That's there's you can make a really shitty looking monster, I guess. Like not scary enough,
why would you blow that? We're only here to draw monsters. Like, that's really why most people are drawing.
So let's talk about Maglev, the Greetings from Maglev. So Kickstarter's funded. You have the books going out. You can also pre-order it through local comic shops.
It's in previews. It's in Diamond. There's Greetings from the Maglev from Invader.
Comics.
Yeah.
So what is the
Maglev is one word.
What is the Maglev? What is Greetings from Maglev? Give us the plot synopsis.
So it's sort of pre-apocalyptic world. It's like it's a world teetering on the apocalypse sort of. You have this superhighway that cuts through the country that was at one time in its prime kind of a tourist, like a Route 66 sort of like tourist icon. It has fallen by the wayside, and the person that owns it is trying to bring it back into like popularity as like an elite superhighway for the rich, like a destination kind of tourist trip for the rich. So it's this magnetic solar powered freeway that cuts from one coast to the other, and only the rich can afford to go on it in their big hover vehicles across the freeway. But it's also become a power source for the rest of the country, which is completely poor and destitute. And so they're all siphoning power off this. They've all kind of gathered their houses and their huts sort of around this, all along the superhighway, and they're siphoning power off of it. So you've got this, this rich superhighway on the top, and then you've got just gangs, and gangs have come up through the kind of the poor communities. And so you've got kind of Mad Max on the sides, and you've got like Elysium or like the super rich kind of heading into the future on the highway. And so the guy that runs it, he wants to send his son out across the highway as like a PR stunt to like bring attention back to it as like a fun party thing. But because it's so dangerous, they hire Chris Miles, who is the protagonist, and she's there to protect the prince sort of on his journey. But they get attacked by gangs on either side. But it's basically Mark wrote it to be like a party bus driving through Mad Max. And so I think that's actually the best. That explanation just came up in the last like couple of weeks, and I was like, that's the explanation. It's just a party bus going through Mad Max.
That's awesome.
That's a great description.
I don't know why we didn't
sold.
Yeah, that should be the title of the book.
Yeah. Yeah. What the hell? That's awesome.
You need to just get a content creator just to say that, so you can put it on the back of the book.
Yeah. Get a pull quote.
Yeah.
Pull quote.
Chris, let me spell your name right. Hold on.
Yeah, there you go. I want to talk about the panel layout just a little bit, because I think you have an interesting approach here. From those sample pages that you show, you have some of the art like surrounding those specific panels, and then you have some like free art without any borders. How did that come about? Was it just how you felt like when you were drawing it, like, oh yeah, this layout makes sense? Because there's a lot of cool interactions you have between the panels.
Yeah, so a lot of that is just by mistake.
Okay.
Like I said, leading up to this, I was painting. I wasn't looking at comics. I think in the 10 years or so that I kind of put comics away, I'd pick up like a Mike Mignola once in a while, or I'd pick up like a handful of comics just like here and there. But I sort of went into it and didn't want to get a lot of comic books right away, because I didn't want to start kind of sponging off of other people. I didn't want to start being derivative. And so a lot of what I was doing is just like me trying to figure out what a black and white composition looks like on a page and how to make that sort of dynamic and move the viewer's eyes. And so, a lot of that, the panel layouts, a lot of the way I was drawing was just sort of me fumbling towards something that I thought would be visually appealing.
Okay.
And so it was sort of by accident that a lot of that stuff happened. And now, like, as soon as I finished this book, like I said, then I started going back into shops, and then I started like looking at other people's layouts and structure and just kind of getting some ideas. But by then I'd already had, 60 pages to kind of use for the next 2 books.
Right. So you kind of had an idea of what you like to do.
Yeah. But I mean, a lot of that first book is just me figuring out what I make comics look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's an interesting way to like find yourself and then go back and check out what the industry's doing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of it too is like at the time, like I'm very much into stand-up comedy, and so at the time I was listening to a lot of stand-up comedy podcasts, and a lot of comedians talk about when they're putting a special together, they stay kind of away from the club. If they go to the club to practice, they don't stick around and watch other comedians. They leave. They get in as close to their headline time, and they leave kind of as soon as they can. They try not to hear anybody else's jokes because they're, creatively you're a sponge and you just absorb things. Right. And whether or not you intended to regurgitate that or to use it again, sometimes you just accidentally do. And so I took that as sort of advice, and I was okay, don't look at other people's comics. You don't want to copy anybody. And I realized that was maybe a little bit foolish. Like I look at comics all the time now. I don't feel like I'm derivative. Maybe someone will see that in my work, but I don't really see that being a problem.
I have the opposite problem. I just listen to every podcast I can.
Yeah. Then you don't have anything to pull from because there's so many.
To be fair, I don't listen to many. I only listen to one comic book podcast, so I guess.
Oh yeah.
I guess I am doing that.
Listen to like tangential stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, it was your first Kickstarter project, and it was funded. So, and then you said it's available. Vader Comics will be publishing it. So
yeah.
Congrats on the first one. That's really cool.
How was the connection with Invader Comics? Did that come about from the beginning, or is that later?
So we actually finished the first book that we just kickstarted. I finished drawing it in 2016, and then Mark and I kind of were busy with life, and we didn't get it lettered until about 2020. But around that time, I had made my own comic called The Tufts, and Mike from Invader, I think he posted a tweet, and he was like, "Hey, I'm here. I got a free day. Send me your concepts or your pitches, and I'll critique them." And I had 4 images, so they were like 2 pages each, because when I did the Tufts, I did them as 2 pages next to each other, so I could see what the whole book would look like. And so I had 4 images, so it was about an 8-page chunk out of the middle of the story that had like a nice beginning, like a setup and a joke and a payoff. Like it was just a nice, solid like beginning and end chunk in the middle of my book. And so I posted a tweet, because on Twitter you have the 4 images that you can put on one post. And so I posted the 4 images of the 8 pages, and I just sent it back to Mike, who I'd never met. I just saw this tweet on Twitter, and I was like, "Hey, this is my comic, The Tufts." And he wrote back immediately, and he was like, "This is great. We should talk." And he was like, "I publish comics." And I'm like, "Yeah, bro, I get it. I publish comics too. We all publish comics, man."
Yeah.
And he was like, "No, we should meet." And so I looked up.
Do you have a podcast too, man?
Yeah, you probably have a podcast and you publish comics.
Yeah, we get it, dog. But I realized he was. I was in the Bay Area at the time, and I realized he was in Berkeley, and I was like, "Why don't we just meet up for some coffee?" And so we went and grabbed coffee, but it was like at the height of COVID, right? It's the height of like quarantine, so we can't meet inside, and it's like September of 2020 in California, and the fucking world is on fire. Like there's just smoke everywhere in the air. I think that was the year we had the Red Day that you guys I think had this year. And it was just like we went and met outside this cafe, and like it's 100 degrees. There's smoke in the air. Everyone's wearing masks. It was fucking miserable. We're drinking hot coffee. And just 2 grown men talking about comics on a park bench. And it was great. He was like, hey, it was Invader was called 215 Publishing back then. And he's like, I'm kind of making changes. I'm kind of doing some things. Maybe we could work together, figure something out. And then we just stayed in touch over the years, the last couple of years. And when he changed to Invader, he called me up and he was like, hey, I'm trying to get you a spot. Let's figure something out. And then kind of as soon as I got on the Nasty, he reached out and he was like, hey, I know you have some books already made. Let's go. Because like I said, the first 2 books of Greetings from the Maglev were already drawn. The first one, which we just kickstarted, was lettered and finished. And he's like, I know you've got projects in the pipeline. Let's see if we can put those out right now. So
nice.
And it's nice because I was able to do this while working on the Nasty, because this work is it's already been done. So
right.
I got a couple books coming out at once.
So this is volume 1, and is there a volume 2 expected in the near future?
Yeah. So we're gonna wait, I think, 6 months between kickstarting the projects, but I've got 1 is done. It's already printed, or it's at the printers right now. 2 is written and drawn. It just needs to be lettered. And then 3 is written, but that one I'll start as soon as I finish up the Nasty.
And for everybody listening, that comes out September 6th, so 1 week from this episode. So go to your local shop.
You can order that anytime. It's not there's no FOC, so you can order that on demand.
Cool. You made the nice segue for us, bringing up the Nasty. I love it when our guests do that for us. We don't have to do shit. The Nasty, yeah. So you jumped out of that project like kind of in the middle of it, right? So how did that come about?
Yeah. So I came on. I think issue 2 had been finished, but that was the artist originally on that was George Combades. He'd done issue 1 and 2, but I think he had some like health issues and he got real busy with other projects, and he'd started. I think they asked me to come on and help fill out some of his backgrounds for him because it takes place inside a video store in the 90s, and so they wanted someone to come in and just design a bunch of posters and fake movies and video cassettes to make it look like a livable video store. And so initially I came on and designed like 30 fictional movie posters, and then I turned those all in, and like the next week they reached out and they're like, well, do you want to come on to the project a little bit more and start filling out more of the book kind of as George does it? And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And so I started doing that, and I turned all that in, and then eventually like it kept kind of snowballing into like more and more involvement in the project. And then one of the days I got a call from Tim Daniel, who's the head of design over at Vault, and he's like, do you want the whole project? Because George wants to back out, and you're already kind of sort of involved, and kind of what the story's about. So would you want to just take over? And so I said, yeah. And I've been on that project since I think January. I started doing. I started on issue 3, so I started book 3 in January.
Nice. It's I'll be honest, it's a book I had never heard of, but after like reading the synopsis and stuff like that, I'm gonna have to read it fairly soon. So I mean, give us the rundown on it, because I mean, you already interested a lot of people, I think, with it saying it takes place in an old school movie store. So
yeah. So it takes place. Well, it takes place in Scotland in the 90s, at a time when they were having kind of a moral panic, and there were kind of these conservative leaders who were trying to ban all these horror movies, and they put a bunch of horror movies on a list called I think it was called the list of nasties, the video nasties, and there were movies that they were trying to ban from public consumption. Wow. So it takes place kind of in that environment. The main character, Thumper Connell, he's like a horror fan, and he's got an imaginary friend who's a slasher from a fictional horror series called Labor Day, and the character's name is Red Ennis. He's kind of this big kind of silent Jason Voorhees character. And as this moral panic is going on, their video store is kind of starting to lose business, and so Thumper and like all his friends that hang out in the video store, they decide to make a horror movie themselves to kind of put on this horror festival and bring the video store back to life. As they start filming their own horror movie, the imaginary friend begins to manifest and come out into the real world, and all kinds of trouble ensues, and cool. arms get torn, and blood and violence and gore, and but it's also just full of heart, and I mean it's just a love letter to horror movies that John has written. It's a beautiful beautiful story.
Awesome.
Sounds right up Mike's alley.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm sold. Yeah. No, that's really
a good one.
It's really cool to have like a horror book that has a lot of heart, and not actually being like people's hearts ripped out.
Yeah, because I mean, John, I don't know if you know John Lees at all, but he his love for horror is apparent. Like it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
It was always something that as a child gave him joy, and I mean, he started watching horror movies just way too young for any child to watch. It's like I've seen pictures of him as like a 9-year-old with like Friday the 13th posters behind him and like Halloween posters, and he's just I only just started watching these movies.
Right.
In adulthood.
Like, by myself. Yeah. Where I could always.
With the lights on.
Yeah, with the lights on.
During the day.
It can't be too dark out. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But it's just like, I think John's love for these films is so apparent in this book, because there's so much joy in this book, and there's so much, sense of humor, and just like, it's the darkness is sort of like on the peripheral.
Mm-hmm. How is that for you, drawing gore and stuff like that? Was that something? Yeah.
No, so here's the thing. Growing up, I didn't watch scary movies, but I was obsessed with like tactical horror. Like I loved, like I was obsessed with Rick Baker, the movie makeup genius from like I think 70s and 80s. I love Rick Baker, but I didn't like any of his movies. So like if I could get any of his stuff in print, like I would just eat it up. And so like the idea of drawing horror is easy. Like it's nothing. Like that's a lot of fun to draw. Consuming it is a little bit harder.
Yeah, so I mean, it was fun to do that style of stuff, but it's a little different than watching it. Yeah, I get that. And there's an appreciation for the practical effects.
Yeah, I feel like that's my intro into the world for sure, because it was all like, that's how you do arts and crafts for a living to me. Like as a kid, I was like, oh, that's how you get to do this forever.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about it like that. Yeah.
When you're taking over for another artist, were you brought on? Did you have similarities to the style, and it kind of made it an easier transition, or did you have to adapt your style, or how did that go for the book?
So they were, to their credit, Vault and John and everyone on the project was like, do make this your own. Like, don't worry about copying George. Like, just, make this your own book. But to me, I wanted some continuity between, because I was starting on issue 3, and I knew readers would have already seen issues 1 and 2. I felt like that was like an awkward position to have a new artist come in. It didn't feel like there was enough of an arc, or it wasn't early enough. So I was like, I tried to kind of hew my style as close to George as I could, and still be comfortable. And so this is, this is much more me trying to draw in George's world, but we're obviously very different artists. I don't think we have, I don't think we're very similar naturally, but I did kind of try, and I kind of maintain sort of a style that was a little bit more in his world than it would be in mine, I think.
Yeah, it's always curious as a reader, because you get those, especially in like big 2 books, you see it a lot, where you get different artists taking over, and it's very jarring. And it can be good, it can be bad, it can be anything in between, but it is just jarring when you got a longtime artist coming in, or just the guy that started the story and then somebody else takes over. So I'm always curious how that goes on the other end of the spectrum with what you guys do behind the scenes.
Ideally, it would be, at least at a breaking point in the story, at least, there are ways to kind of do it, but that wasn't really on the table for us. Like this book, it lost its artist, and I think, honestly, I think it's a book that deserves to come out. And so I was gonna, I've done everything I can to sort of keep that float.
With this one compared to the other project, I mean, you already have that finished. You have a deadline now. So how's that going for you? Like submitting, do you have to submit pages and a timeline for that? Yeah. Like, is that hard to do, or?
No, that's, okay. I get up early. I do the work. I have, obviously I have a day job, and I have a 3.5-year-old. So there's a lot of of chaos in my life.
Right.
No, I've always been really good with deadlines. I'm that type of artist, which, I like to get up early and start work kind of right away. But yeah, no, I've so far I've hit all my deadlines a little bit early.
It's funny.
I think,
yeah, I think like, I don't know if you've noticed this, Chris, but it was almost like pre-COVID when we would do interviews. We hear a lot of like grinding and like a lot of deadline issues and stuff. But then like after COVID, we talked to a lot of artists, and I don't know if it's just the volume of projects now, or like people have a better grasp on what they're doing. But
I think a big part of that, and actually this kind of fits into what what's going on with you right now, Adam, was people had a lot of stuff because there was no comics coming out for like 3 months, quote unquote, no comics coming out, and people built up work.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing when you give people a cushion and you're not just constantly grinding them into the ground.
Just that few months to have like projects finished. So
it's amazing what happens when you do that.
Yeah. So that's good. You already have a rhythm and and stuff like that.
I mean, also like I'm maybe a little bit older, and so I'm not. I feel like if I'd started in comics younger, that would be more of an issue. But the way it is now, it's like, no, this is just about work. Like at some point, you just have to log the hours.
Right. You just got to, and like you said, you could just draw a panel at a time. Even just it's like, okay, I could draw a panel, and then I got to take care of the baby. So or something,
my wife, does a ton to kind of like give me some space when I need it. And
right.
We have a pretty good system going right now. And granted, there's a bit of a crunch with the Nasty because I came on the project late. Some of my runway was sort of burnt up, but she and I both know this isn't how it's going to be. Like I'm not going to need to be to maintain this kind of schedule. Starting in about a month and a half, I'll be done with the whole thing. So,
and we'll ask the one last annoying question before we let you go. Like, is there a certain style of story you want to draw like in the future? I mean, I don't know how many projects you see yourself working on, but like, would you want to get into like a fantasy book, or is there something like you're kind of doing a slasher book right now? You did a post-apocalyptic book.
Yeah.
Like, is there something you're like, oh, that'd be really cool to do?
More monsters. I think
more monsters.
Nice.
Previously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
all right. Cool.
Like I sort of like 100% fantasy. It would be fun, but I sort of like some sense of already established reality. I like some of that, like, sort of like the way I like to work. I like a little bit of like structure and freedom within that structure. So, I like this because there's kind of like horror and gore set in a everyday environment. I do kind of like that sort of balance. I don't know, man. I honestly, it's not the type of projects. It's the other creatives that I'm more interested in. So it's whatever project is out there that I can get on kind of get in a gang and do. I think I'm more excited about than like a specific genre, I guess. Anything really. Probably not noir. Probably not like slice of life stuff. I need a little bit of fantasy. I need a little bit of kind of visual imagination.
And it looks like the Nasty issue 4 is yet to hit shops. So September.
Yeah. So that so they we're on a break right now. I think the FOC for 4 is September
6th. Yep.
Or not? No, I think it's the following week.
Oh, okay. Because I see it on Previews World right now.
It says on Diamond September 6th is the in-shop date.
6th.
That could be wrong though. Diamond's notorious.
They might have to update it.
Yeah, shit. I think it's September 18th. I think is FOC. I might be wrong about that. Oh, they're gonna fire me.
Sometime in September we can.
Yeah, dude, we're doing we're starting a big marketing push like around Labor Day for the FOC for 4. Right. So it'll be blasted everywhere.
Yeah, and we'll have this episode to share with everybody. So yeah.
So if people want to follow you, Adam, I mean, do you make terrible life decisions like using Twitter or anything like that? Yeah. Where can we send people?
Not anymore, but I did. I have it still.
We all do. We don't know what to do with it. It kind of just sits
there. That's kind of the feeling.
We retweet shit once in a while.
I'm Adam C. Cahoon, so Adam CCAHOON on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads. I think mostly those, but I'm mostly on Instagram and Twitter.
Okay.
With that handle.
All right. So everybody out there, you know the drill by now. I'll have links in the show notes down below. The links I'll have for you will be from the previews catalog, so you can just click on those, subscribe, give them to your local comic shops, and enjoy all the good comics. Awesome. Adam, thanks so much for taking the time today. Really appreciate it, and we look forward to the next time, man.
Thanks, Adam.
All right, buddy. Thank you. Appreciate the show. Thanks for having me.